Dr. Switzer?
Yes. Come in. I'm just washing my hands.
I'm Catherine Bigman. Janet Carlisle referred me.
Oh, yes. Fear of being buried alive in a box.
Yes, that's me. Should I lay down?
Oh, no. We don't do that anymore. Just have a seat. And let me tell you a bit about our billing. I charge $5 for the first 5 minutes. And then absolutely nothing after that. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Too good to be true, as a matter of fact.
Well, I can almost guarantee you that our session won't last the full 5 minutes. Now, we don't do any insurance billing, so you would either have to pay in cash or by check.
Wow. Okay.
And I don't make change.
All right.
And go.
Go.
Well,
What?
tell me about the problem that you wish to address.
Oh, okay. Well, I have this fear of being buried alive in a box. I start thinking about being buried alive, and I begin to panic.
Has anyone ever tried to bury you alive in a box?
No, but truly thinking about it does make my life horrible. I mean, I can't go through tunnels or be in an elevator or in a house, anything boxy.
So what you're saying is you're claustrophobic.
Yes, that's it.
All right, well, let's go, Catherine. I'm going to say 2 words to you right now. I want you to listen to them very, very carefully. Then I want you to take them out of the office with you and incorporate them into your life.
Well, shall I write them down?
Well, if it makes you comfortable, it's just 2 words. We find most people can remember them.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, here they are.
Stop it!
I'm sorry?
Stop it!
Stop it?
Yes. S-T-O-P, new word, I-T.
So, what are you saying?
You know, it's funny. I say 2 simple words, and I cannot tell you the amount of people who say exactly the same thing you're saying. I mean, this is not Yiddish, Catherine. This is English. Stop it.
So, I should just stop it.
There you go. I mean, you don't want to go through life being scared of being buried alive in a box, do you? I mean, that sounds frightening.
It is.
Then stop it.
I can't. I mean, it's been with me since childhood.
No, we don't go there. Just stop it.
So I should just stop being afraid of being buried alive in a box.
You got it. Good go. Well, it's only been 3 minutes, so that will be $3.
Actually, I only have a 5, so.
Well, I don't make change.
Then I guess I'll take the full 5 minutes.
Fine. All right. Well, what other problems would you like to address?
I'm bulimic. I stick my fingers down my throat.
Stop it! What are you, a nut of some kind? Don't do that.
But I'm compelled to. My mom used to call me fatty.
No. No, we don't go there.
But I've been having this dream.
No, we don't go there either.
But my horoscope did say...
We definitely don't go there. Just stop it. What else?
Well, I have self-destructive relationships with men.
Stop it!
You want to be with a man, don't you?
Yes.
Well, then stop it. Don't be such a big baby.
I wash my hands a lot.
That's all right.
It is?
I wash my hands all the time. There's a lot of germs out there. Yeah, don't worry about that one.
I'm afraid afraid to drive.
Well, stop it! How are you going to get around? Get in the car and drive, you kook. Stop it!
You stop it! You stop it!
What's the problem, Catherine?
I don't like this. I don't like this therapy at all. You're just telling me to stop it.
And you don't like that?
No, I don't.
So you think we're moving too fast? Is that it?
Yes. Yes, I do.
All right, then let me give you 10 words that I think will clear everything up for you. You want to get a pad and a pencil for this one?
All right.
Are you ready? Mm-hmm. All right, here are the 10 words. Stop it or I'll bury you alive in a box!
This is one of my all-time favorite YouTube clips, obviously because I'm a counselor, but most importantly because it illustrates just how far distortions in thinking can take us. It would be great if we could just stop it, but most of us can't. And we're going to talk about that today. I've entitled this webinar, Think This, Not That. And I've invited Patty Diamond to be here with us today to discuss part of why we can't stop it. And you were instrumental in making this idea connect with me. When I shared this with you the first time, you said, Rita, these need to be laminated and put up on everybody's refrigerator.
Rita, I still think that. Cognitive distortions were ruining my life. They were driving my thought life, which led to driving my actions and my behaviors, which of course affected all the relationships in my life, with myself, with my family, and with others.
And so, hopefully you've downloaded the Cognitive Distortions handout from the website, and we're going to go through these. It's going to be important for you to pay attention and notice which ones of these you're most prone to make, because we can't change what we don't notice. And our belief systems, our self-talk, and cognitive distortions are the key pieces for us to walk in freedom in many of the mental health issues that we face. So let's jump in here. Feel free to take notes. The first one that we're going to talk about today is black and white or all or nothing thinking. And think about this. Here you either see things as black or white, no shades of gray. Either things are totally perfect or they're totally a failure. And if you could imagine a goalpost with two opposing, sides here, one side says I'm a total failure, one side says I'm the best person in the world. Well, guess what? There's a lot of grass in between those two opposing goalposts. So what we want to do is we want to bring our thinking into more middle ground. Okay? So I may not be a total failure, so I might say to you, well, okay, you're a total failure. Have you ever succeeded at anything? And you might say, well, yeah, I did pretty good at this last job that I had. Okay, well, there you go. So you're not a total failure. So now we're inching down the continuum into more middle ground thinking. Patty, any thoughts about how all or nothing affected you?
All or nothing, for me, was very applicable in the area of body image. I think I've tried every diet that exists on the planet Earth, and I also think that I have seen myself in both goalposts, really thin and looking good, and really fat. And both of them were distortions. And I couldn't accept or live out acceptance. Accepting myself as is and working towards a middle ground where, no, I'm not always looking a certain way, or I don't need to always look a certain way. So it really was applicable in the area of body image for me.
Okay, great. How about overgeneralizing? And overgeneralizing is falsely assuming that one negative experience in our life is always applicable in other situations. So for example, say you dated someone who broke your heart, and now you take that and you generalize that into all men are no good. Anything with that for you?
Yeah, for me it was a personality issue. I'm very much an extrovert, very much a people person. And until I began to understand that I was filtering everyone's reaction through overgeneralization, I didn't get why I would walk away and do a self-analysis on, I did something wrong. It's all about me. But it was because I was taking the signals and the messages I was receiving as I was communicating with others and overgeneralizing their reaction to, there's something wrong with who I am. Really got to the core of who I was. I shouldn't, and lots of shoulds and musts. I shouldn't be this way. I need to change. There's something wrong with me. Underneath all of those was an overgeneralization of what someone, some input that I was getting from other people.
Okay, good. Mental filter. A mental filter is if something is a combination of both negative and positive aspects, you choose to focus solely on the negative. And as a result, your entire view of the person or the situation is predominantly negative. Anything with that one for you?
I think overgeneralization and mental filter really are intertwined. Mental filter, to me, when I picture a filter, I think of what am I sifting and sorting things through? And when, in most cases, mental filter for me became all negative. That was again, black and white, all or nothing.
And so was that associated with body image for you? Or people rejecting you?
It's mostly about
rejection.
And I would say a lot of that had to do with, I can think of a specific example with my mother-in-law, where if you imagine a hoop being a way in which I felt accepted, and the filter in which I filtered that, it wouldn't matter what she said or did, I was filtering it through, she doesn't approve of me, I'm not sufficient, I'm not the person she chose. And I didn't recognize that I was doing that. I was filtering every action, every word, every scenario through that filter.
And that's a really good point, and a point that I want to keep driving home for folks. You can't change what you don't notice. So noticing is going to be critical as you move through this. The self-talk, the beliefs lecture that we'll do later on is critical for you to notice because you can't change what you don't notice. So you have to slow it down, notice these patterns in your life, notice these thoughts, and really begin to key in on, boy, I'm really doing this.
And I think I would add to that, Rita, is a willingness. As we talk about these distortions today, they're almost as if in my life, they were a security blanket. They were a way in which I dealt with my reality, good or bad, mostly bad, that I didn't like. And to ask me to give those up, which you did, when you challenged me with a new way to think, a new way to filter my life and my circumstances, it wasn't something I embraced with a big smile on my face and a lot of willingness initially. But as I began to understand how cognitive distortions were affecting my life,
your mood,
and
your
power,
feelings,
and the power they were having over me and the people that I cared for, and who I was. As I began to understand that, my willingness grew. And what I mean by willingness was a willingness to acknowledge, as you've said, you have to acknowledge that I had some control over my thoughts, and a willingness to change and to take a look at what was underneath those thoughts, what it was stopping me from, where was it preventing, where was it a roadblock?
Okay, so what you're saying then, it was meeting some needs for you.
Sure it was.
Okay.
Sure it was, because when I was staying in all or nothing, it gave me something to do. If I was fat, believing I was fat, I could go on a diet. It gave me something to do. So the idea of giving up those thoughts, what do I have left?
Yeah.
There's a vacuum. There's a sense of it's gotten me through.
And I'll have to learn to live differently if I give this up.
Correct. And when we talk a little bit more about fortune telling, I think you'll really understand what I'm saying in terms of my childhood.
Okay, and the next one we've got here is jumping to conclusions. This is huge for people. We all do this. You don't have to notice this. We do it with our spouses, we do it with our children, boyfriends, whatever. Here we make a negative interpretation about a person, a circumstance, or an event, though the evidence may not convincingly support that conclusion. Okay, so for example, let's say I am speaking at a luncheon and I walk into the room and everyone stares. And that morning I was feeling fat and ugly, and I didn't like the outfit that I had on. And so I walk into the room, everyone stares, and I happen to look around and I see two ladies over there whispering. So now all of a sudden I think they're talking about me. I really look lousy. My outfit stinks. I'm just not together today. And so I go ahead and do my presentation. And then a little later on after the luncheon, those two ladies come up to me and say, Rita, you really look nice today. I love your outfit. See how I jump to conclusions? It's easy to do this with our spouses. I'm sure you can list umpteen examples like I can where I've jumped to conclusions about something my husband did or said, and I've taken it a mile down the road, and it was totally opposite of what he might have meant.
Yes. The answer is yes. I think jumping to conclusions is something that happens every day. In
Every day for us.
Most every one of our lives. And the word that I associate this is always and never.
Mm-hmm.
And always, particularly when I begin to move into an always thinking, I just let the snowball roll, and I take evidence that necessarily isn't there to come to a conclusion that I believe is true.
Mm-hmm.
And in most cases, that conclusion isn't usually a happy one or a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Jumping to conclusions usually leads to a negative result. I can't think of many times when I've jumped to conclusions and it had it be a positive image.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very subtle cognitive distortion, but it is definitely powerful in how we go about viewing our day and our lives each day.
And so some of these thinking errors really take their roots in our belief systems. We don't jump to conclusions necessarily based on a situation or circumstance that doesn't have its roots or source of origin in our own stuff. In other words, I might be used to being called fat. Like maybe, when I was a kid, people teased me about being fat. So I walk into the room and think everybody's thinking I'm fat when I'm really not fat.
And that's what I mean by the always.
Mm-hmm.
How the word always really encompasses that cognitive distortion, because jumping to conclusion, it's as if the conclusion has already been drawn.
Right.
And I build a case of evidence to support that conclusion. And really, jumping to conclusions are based on our beliefs.
Absolutely.
Because as you've pointed out, if I believe I'm not worthy of being known, if I believe that I'll give you an example. Stay-home mom. I'm a stay-home mom. I'm blessed to be a stay-home mom and have been for the last 25 years. When I'm in social situations where all the women are professionals, meaning they're working in the world, and I'm not, that is a situation where I can very quickly allow jumping to conclusions affect how I feel and how I respond.
Think?
Well, what do I have to say in this conversation? They all think I'm stupid because I'm a stay-at-home mom. Or it could be just from a question asked, like the very common question, what do you do? I could take that question and jump to a conclusion from that, which is, well, I don't do much of anything every day. That sort of thing, where I begin to jump to the fact that my worth and who I am as a person is tied into their view of me.
And so that's a good point and leads into the next one, which is mind reading. We mind read what we believe other people are thinking about us, which may have nothing to do with the truth. You're assuming and thinking that these people are thinking you're stupid, when in fact they may think, wow, that's a real admirable thing for somebody to be doing in this day and age, actually staying home and nurturing and discipling their children.
It's interesting you say mind reading, because we're sitting here talking about thoughts. And truly the only private thing left in this very public world that we're living in today, with social media and with really no shock factor, are our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So I have had to and continue to have to become the person who monitors those thoughts. And when I'm choosing to think that I can read your thought, I can't read anyone's thought. And again, that's what I learned, was that mind reading was something I was doing and I wasn't really even conscious of it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't exist. It can't happen. There's no facts, particularly in mind reading, because they're private. I can't see inside of your brain, nor can you.
Mm-hmm.
So it was good for me to be able to see that. But yes, that does happen. I think that and jumping to conclusions are things we just do that we're not aware of as much.
And so, we're going to also talk about dispute handles, ways to do Socratic questioning, asking yourself certain questions that I teach my clients to burn in their brain cells so that when these things come up, I've got some things to ask myself that will help bring me back again into that middle ground between two goalpost type thinking. Okay, you talked about fortune telling. This is anticipating that things will turn out badly and believing that your prediction is an already established fact. Again, this has its roots in, if you've had a lot of trauma in your life, if you've had bad things happen, then you kind of think there's this dark cloud surrounding you, and everywhere you go, you're waiting for the shoe to drop. Talk about that a little bit.
I'm going to get very personal in this example. I was raised in an alcoholic home with an alcoholic father, and that was difficult. There was a lot of uncertainty in my life. There was a lot of change, abrupt change, not much stability. And I remember the first time that one of my sons came home in high school and had been drinking. And my mind went immediately to, he's going to be an alcoholic. He's just like my father. It's going to be a repeat scenario.
Okay, so you were generalizing.
I was overgeneralizing, and I was also at the same time anticipating his life was going to turn out bad or worse than what I'd grown up with.
Wow.
And I think what you talked a little bit about dispute handles, and I know we're going to talk about that in another session, but all I want to say is what's helped me the most is what evidence do I have to support that thought?
Absolutely.
And staying in the moment.
Yeah.
Fortune telling, when people go to have their hands read, they go to have the fortunes told, we pick up fortune cookies. It's about the future.
Yeah.
And that's unknown for all of us, but it gives me a false sense, for whatever reason, for someone who's walking out cognitive distortions. Again, I go back to it's always negative. It's never a positive ending. It's always a negative ending. I'm never fortune telling that this is going to be great. It's negative.
I'm fortune telling something bad's going to happen.
And I'm projecting that onto that person. And that, I can't say this strongly enough, that is the part of cognitive distortions that I wanted to change, because as I began to understand how I was thinking, I could see the effects and the pressure that it was putting on other people that I loved and cared for dearly.
And I think that it's a good point, a point well taken, where we live with these cognitive distortions in the past or in the future. And neither place will bring us life. We need to realize life in the here and now, in the moment, and we need to stay in the moment. Otherwise, we're going to be blown and tossed by the wind. Okay, next one is magnifying, and here we're just exaggerating the importance of things. These next couple are going to be really huge for people that have anxiety disorders or issues with, panic or any kind of anxiety disorder. I'm an anxiety person, and that's exactly what I used to do. I'd magnify things, blow them out of proportion, the severity of things, the outcomes, and it was just horrific. Anything with that for you in terms of magnifying?
That one is not one I've put a whole lot of thought into, except one area I can think of, and that would be my own temptations, and understanding that just because I have a thought doesn't mean I'm a horrible, awful person, and that I'm going to turn into the Wicked Witch of the North, for lack of a better way to put it. So I would magnify, and it would almost frighten me. Why would I be thinking this? And I would go to, that must mean. And
I'm a bad person, I'm a horrible
Christian. It was always a negative. It was something that connotated my worth. And it would stop me, it would rob me from the moment and enjoying what is and who I am, and put me into a state of trying to prevent what's going to happen. So yeah, magnifying with my children, an example would be maybe if I saw a habit or a change in their behavior, I would immediately jump to, well, that's going to mean this later on, and then this later on, and then this later on.
So a small problem,
becomes,
like, your son taking a few drinks means he's going to be a full-blown alcoholic in the next year.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And then the flip side of magnifying, obviously, is minimizing, and that means we shrink the importance of things. This is really huge for codependent patterns or people who are married to alcoholics. We tend to make excuses, minimize. We can do this even with our friends in terms of if we're people pleasers or the try harder, performance-based acceptance type folks. If somebody hurts our feelings or offends us, we don't like to, conflict. We'll minimize it. Well, it really wasn't that bad. Oh, she didn't mean it. Or he's trying. He's doing the best he can. All of that shrinks the importance of things and it gets us nowhere. We have to be able to confront and address things in order for us to walk in the freedom and rest that God's designed us to walk in.
Yeah, minimizing for me is about denial, and it's about playing a victim role or blaming. It's one of those three things. When I'm denying the power of something, and I'm going to be honest here and say that as I look back on some of my parenting skills, there are no perfect parents. I'm not one of them. They don't exist. Perfection doesn't exist. But there are things I would change, and I think anyone would say that as a parent. But I minimize some of the choices that I made in terms of getting a quick response, how that affected the people in my life, particularly my children. I minimize the effects of my own actions.
Okay.
And I'm specifically talking about anger.
Okay. Can you give us an example?
Okay. I think that anger for me, it's very well known that it's not it's a secondary emotion. So it was covering hurt, pain, or loss for me. I didn't know that. I just felt justified in my anger, and I think that more than once my children, and particularly my more sensitive child, suffered. He took my anger as truth. And
so you minimize the anger in your own
minimize
life.
my anger,
denying
response.
it, maybe avoiding it.
I deserve to be angry. This would make anybody angry. All the stuff that I fed myself, and some of them, really fit on this sheet. I reasoned it out. It was okay to be angry. Not really, but I didn't know any other way at the time to cope with strong emotions, strong volatile emotions. So at this time in my life, I don't minimize my anger at all. In fact, today I was reading Proverbs 15. A gentle answer turns away wrath. And I made 2 sticky notes, which I live by, sticky notes, put one in my bathroom and one over my kitchen sink to remind me yet again that I don't want to walk out in anger. But I'm not going to leave it there. I'm going to say that I've been able to forgive myself for that too. But if I wasn't acknowledging that I was minimizing my emotions and how I was handling them, I never would have able to want to or bring about change in my relationships.
That's a great example because you are so right on when you say minimizing has to do with our own stuff. It can have to do with our own avoidance and denial tendencies. And believe me, denial is a powerful emotion, very powerful emotion.
Yes.
Okay, then catastrophizing, and that goes along with magnifying. It's kind of the, magnifying on crack. I attribute extreme and horrible consequences to the events of life. So working with a lot of people with anxiety issues and having had anxiety and panic myself, you might look at something, you might say, for example, that I had some anxiety or had a panic attack, and I'm going to be institutionalized for the rest of my life because of this. I'm never going to get better. Again, it's using those extreme words. Okay, so I catastrophize. A turn down for a date means a life of utter isolation. I'll never find someone. I'll be alone for the rest of my life. So we catastrophize things.
Oh, I have a great example of this.
Go ahead.
Again, it's not through the lens, this one of my life, but through another son's life. This particular son chose not to do an internship, and I love to believe that, you do A plus B equals C, when I thought I was playing God in people's lives. And part of A plus B equals C is getting an internship to get the next step of a job. Well, this particular son said, I'm not doing an internship. He had another plan that summer. He'd worked it all out. He was going to be a tennis instructor, and he had it all set in motion. Well, my mind jumped to recipe for catastrophe. You'll be competing against people. You're not going to get a job, blah, 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 what I would call verbal vomit. What was gained from that? Did I have who am I? Can I see the future? So to me, catastrophizing also goes into jumping to conclusions,
Yeah.
fortune telling. There's an overlap with all of these.
Yeah.
But the key, and the funny part, because we serve a God who I believe has a sense of humor, is that son now has a fabulous job in the business world during very difficult economic times, came out of a very top university, wasn't in the business school, and got a better job paying more than some who were.
Yeah.
And so I think the Lord reminded me yet again, these are the plans I have for you, says the Lord. So I need to always be aware of how quickly I jump into catastrophizing someone else's actions. And I want to tune into that a little bit more with myself. Haven't struggled with that quite as much as All or Nothing and some of the others. Or maybe I'm just not aware yet.
And that's awesome. That's awesome that you have that self-awareness. This requires a lot of self-awareness and building up that skill for ourselves. Emotional reasoning. This is a really, really important one because emotional reasoning speaks about our intrinsic worth. It takes our feelings of sadness or rejection or feeling devalued and actually speaks them back to ourselves in ways that indicate that we're losers or we're worthless. So in other words, I may have a feeling about myself, but I make it a fact by saying I am unlovable, I am a loser, I am worthless. So that's really, really huge. Anything with that for you?
That's a hard one for me because this is childhood related for me. We were very poor growing up, and I always felt different. I have always said that that's pretty much the theme of my childhood.
So you felt like you
I'm
didn't
different,
belong.
and I didn't belong. And so because of that thinking, I began to think, if I don't belong and their lives look good and they're winning and they're doing well, there's something wrong with me. And at the time, I didn't realize how much that was impacting decisions I would make. For example, being ashamed of where I lived and reasoning that no one would want to date me or pick me up or see me because of where I lived and because of when I was in a sorority. That was very difficult. How
so?
Well, because the fathers would come down in business suits and be company executives, and my dad had a third-grade education. And the whole time I was in that situation, I think I tried to disprove that I was a loser and prove. It became a performance-based acceptance kind of living and thinking.
And it does for
that
so
I
many
did
of
not
us.
realize that I was doing. But it became I'll prove you differently, and I'll prove myself differently, that I'm not a loser. So my worth was coming from things totally out of my control, other people's choices, and the family of origin that I was born into. And secondly, how I viewed always looking at other folks and using other people as the barometer in which I viewed myself.
So you compared yourself.
Correct.
And emotional reasoning lays down belief systems in our lives that we live out of. And we'll see later as we do another webinar on beliefs, how important it is. These things are built, kind of brick upon brick. Needs, beliefs, thinking errors, self-talk, all of them kind of go
And if
together.
I may say, I think emotional reasoning in today's world, there's a false sense of being connected that the social media world is fostering for young children, young kids, not children, young adults today, where they open up their Facebook and they see how much fun everybody else in the world is having. They're not living that life. They're not off in Paris smelling the roses and running a triathlon and all the other things that people post. And there's a false sense there's something wrong with me. Why?
I'm not okay.
I'm not okay. I'm a loser. I don't have 7,000 friends
Friends.
on my Facebook, and 3 million aren't following me on Twitter. And I think that's something that isn't being addressed and is kind of hard to see, but I've had many people, even adults, speak to me that way. I don't like Facebook because it makes me feel bad about my life. Or I don't like social media because I feel like I don't measure up.
Right.
I'm a loser in some way. I'm missing out on something.
So we take all of these bits and pieces and we pour them into ourselves, and they become other building blocks to say, for us to emotionally reason that we're not good enough.
And when we, Rita, when we talk the next time about how to dispute cognitive distortions, I will take one of the words from Bob Newhart. It really is about stop. That part we can do.
Absolutely. We can choose about that.
We can choose that. We have choices in stopping before the train wreck continues in our mind.
This next one is huge. It's should, must, have tos, and ought to be statements. So these are inflexible ways of thinking that box you into this rigid, perfectionistic way of life. I should have life be a certain way. I should have people like me. I must have people like me. I have to do this. I never do that. All of these statements really box us in to rigid ways of thinking in life. And so you allow yourself no room for error. When things aren't the way you think that they should be, you might feel guilt, anger, depression, frustration, or hurt. How have these kinds of statements boxed you into your life?
I'm going to give an analogy in our home where one of our sons developed an eating disorder, which is very rare anyway. It's not something that society talks much about, men and eating disorders. And when this happened, he was a young man. I felt things weren't the way that I wanted them, and I thought they would turn out for that son. I felt all those emotions, angry, guilt, because I wanted to believe that the box, what I would call the box of thinking and with no room for error, was A plus B equals C.
You worked the formula.
If I did
and
everything right, things would turn out this way. It should be this way. It ought to turn out like that. And in this particular situation, it couldn't have been more blatantly the opposite of what one would expect. And now I'd like to talk about that in terms of how that child responded to his situation. He was entrenched in an eating disorder, and the basic premise and the basic thinking was how he should look, what he ought to be doing. I have to do these things, and we all know how that looks.
Sure.
Counting almonds,
weighing food,
and it was such a distortion. But there was such a box, as you would say, very tight boundaries. That's how and I had lived up to that point believing that if I would just do and follow the formula living and do things the right way, there would be a certain outcome. There would be a guaranteed outcome.
Right.
So there was no flexibility how that outcome. That was an immense amount of pressure. And I'm just using that one example, but that's pressure I carried a long time for myself, just continuing to try to live by formula and believe that there's power in that. And as I became more and more clear in my thinking and understanding that I can't live, there is no formula. I can't, it's like the frog game. I would follow the formula, and the frog game where the little kids play where you try to pop it down with a hammer, another frog would pop up.
Right. Right. Because the formula doesn't work. The formula leaves out the sovereignty of God.
That's right.
If the formula worked, we'd all have perfect lives.
That's right.
And so in order to change up this type of thinking, we have to, again, modify it. People don't have to like you. There's going to be people in your life that don't like you. Life doesn't have to be a certain way.
And if I may interject here, excuse me for interrupting you there, a phrase I use now is I've learned to sit with things. Sit with my feelings. You taught me that.
Learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Right. I never really internalized it that way. I put it as sit with it. Before, I was always reacting. And usually the reaction was based on a distortion. And now, because of good therapy and also willingness and God's hand in my life and His grace, I can sit with things. I can be uncomfortable in a situation. I can allow feelings to come up that I don't necessarily have to react to. Challenging, yes, but I can live through it. And you're right. There was a fall, again, the unwillingness I had. I remember saying to you once, Rita, I remember saying to you, don't make me give this up yet. I'm not ready. And that particular distortion is one that tied in with fortune telling a bit, but it was fantasy. Are you going to talk about fantasy in some of the other ones, or is
No, but if you want to go ahead.
What I'd like to say is about fantasy was that was the way I coped with my childhood. That was the way I dealt with things that were outside of my control. I fantasized how I wanted my life to be when I was a big girl, when I was a grown-up, and when I was in charge. You know what? Most of that's come true. It's been wonderful. God has blessed me immensely. But I did not understand that fantasy was a go-to in a negative way, with my negative feelings when things didn't go my way, because people aren't perfect. Children aren't perfect. Husbands aren't perfect. Jobs aren't perfect. Life isn't perfect.
Amen.
So what I would do and continue, it still continues to be my go-to, and that's fantasy. And that day when you challenged me in a temptation struggle I was having, I said, please don't make me of course you can't make me do anything, but I wasn't willing to give that up as a way of coping. I was getting something back.
Bingo. The payoff. There was
Exactly.
a payoff, and there is. And so when life doesn't turn out the way we think it should or must or have to, that's an easy place to go. The thing we have to realize about that is it's an illusion, because the fantasy that we think is going to provide all this control or all these happy endings very rarely does. Very rarely does. So,
But the way the illusion is removed is by getting rid of the cognitive distortions.
Right.
Because the illusion was continuing to be fed because I was overgeneralizing. I was fortune telling what the outcome was going to be. I was mind reading. I was jumping to conclusions.
Sure.
But when you say the word illusion, I had to confront myself with, you're right. I have absolutely no evidence to support. What knowledge do I have
Right.
that if this happened, I will get what I think I want?
Exactly.
But it was about payoff. And I think it's important that you put the word payoff in here for every distortion we've talked about up to this point. There is a payoff to
For these.
living your life entrenched in cognitive distortions.
Sure, and that payoff is it meets our needs for love, adequacy, security, value, worth, and acceptance. Each one of these somehow either takes us out of reality or meets a need for us.
I would totally agree with that.
And so with all this thinking, we have no evidence that the grass is always greener on the other side of the
Right.
fence. Because guess what? When we get over there, there's a whole host of problems waiting for us there. But we
Right.
want to believe otherwise because it takes us out of our present reality and our pain.
Right.
Okay, then perfectionistic thinking. You have a tendency to place high expectations on yourself and others, and when anything falls short, you become hurt or disappointed. And this goes along with the black and white thinking. It's that perfectionistic thinking. Again, we have to move that into middle ground, because generally those of us that are type A personalities or perfectionistic tend to run ourselves into the ground. We have high standards, we have performance-based acceptance, and we do the try harder thing over and over and over.
Perfectionistic relationships.
They don't exist this side of eternity, first of all.
Right, and perfectionistic thinking, it kills relationships. This one's hard for me because I see it so tied into performance-based acceptance. And I sometimes think, even as in the church and as believers, we have a view of God which is, I have to change first and then God will love me. I have to be perfect. I have to do. And oftentimes the tools in which we give folks who are struggling are do something more,
Exactly.
pray more, read more, exercise
Fast more, tithe more. Yeah.
And that sets a bar and a scale for folks. But what I know to be true about God is that God takes me as is. I love the way John Ortberg says that in his book, Everybody's Normal Until You Know Them. And he gives the equation of an as-is bin in a department store. You walk in, you buy the product. If it has a hole, you take it as is. God does that with us. I am wanting and continue to walk out that kind of living with my family of origin and my family, my current family, and with others. But it's only by the grace of God. And that only changed when I began to see that I had the wrong view of God. I thought he wanted me to be perfect. I thought I had a narrow range of behavior. I couldn't be who I was, how he made me, because I was trying to live up to a standard that I thought that's what God wants of me and that's what others want. The saddest and the hardest part for me, and to me the most traumatic, is recognizing how much I projected that onto my children. And I am blessed to have a wonderful brood of 4 great kids, and in terms of who they are and the choices they've made and the kind of people they're becoming. And my husband. But because of that false belief and desire to live in perfection, I did project that onto them.
Okay, the next one is personalization. Here we look at everything that happens through a subjective lens. So in other words, everything is about me. Everything becomes about me. Objective folks think nothing's about them. It's always everybody else's problem. But people that are subjective personalize every experience. Somebody says something, oh, it's my fault. Somebody does something, oh, it's all about me. So it's that kind of thing. Any thoughts about that one?
Sometimes I think personalization is dodging the real issue. I've seen it reversed. I have a child who reverses it on me and makes it about me when it's really about him. And so I think it's a dodge the bullet. I think it's a coping mechanism that's used to not take responsibility. And it brings about self-pity. It brings about woe is me, and usually gets the attention. Again, the payoff.
Yeah, the payoff.
Because usually you're comforted and told, oh, no, that's not about you. It's not really. So there's that motive behind it when I myself have done that in the past, and as I observe others who personalize things. I think that there's also pride. I think personalization exalts my importance. I think it says that in my life it said, well, of course, it's about me, and it makes me above you, and it doesn't allow me to be just another human being on the face of the earth.
Okay. Self-defeating thinking is our last one, and self-defeating thinking is any unnecessary thought or belief that causes you needless pain or turmoil and makes it harder for you to reach your goals or get what you want. There's a benefit for self-defeating thinking too. I mean, that can get us attention. But you have to be asking yourself, is there any way that I can think about this situation that would make it equally or more profitable and would help me reach my goals? Most of us engage in self-defeating thinking, and we're going to do a whole nother webinar on self-talk and expand on this. But tell me some of the self-defeating thoughts you've had, because this is a big one I ask folks to zero in on. What are the tapes playing in your head? They don't necessarily start with today's issue, but they play back from when you were a kid. Maybe, you know, your dad deserted you. Maybe, you know, your mom was critical and told you couldn't do anything right. Those tapes lay down those belief systems about self, God, and the world around us and impact our entire life's trajectory.
I think self-defeating thinking starts with a really tiny word, and it's if. If I was, if he was, if only. And that perpetuates no choice. And it perpetuates a sense of being out of control, that who I am and how my life turns out and how my day turns out is really in someone else's control and outside of my control. And especially if I can compare it to poor choices or my past. Self-defeating thinking leaves no room for God. It leaves no room for change. It leaves absolutely no room for growth. And I think it's probably one of the most powerful negative self-talks that exists.
Any particular things that would play through your mind when you were at your low points, or, you know, with the food, or with your son's eating disorder? Like, maybe it's my fault. Moms go through that all the time. You know, your kid's doing something wrong, or going through a struggle. And
in terms of my marriage, self-defeated thinking looks like this. It looks like, if I just wasn't so blank, then I would get what I want. And it was about who I am and how I express myself and but the point of measurement was my husband's response. And so I was setting myself up to be the cause and the
this person's
reason
behavior.
for a person's choices
Right.
and behavior. And it perpetuated nothing except making me feel like I couldn't be who I was
Yeah, and
designed
misery.
to be. And misery.
And so that's,
Right.
I think, what we have to ask ourselves with this whole concept of self-defeating thinking. How long do I want to make myself miserable? Do I want to upset myself? Because self-defeating thinking, left unchecked, after a few minutes, crash and burn.
Exactly.
How about with the body image issues that you struggled with? How did that work with self-defeating thinking? Because you obviously beat yourself up for many years
Oh, correct.
in the past about...
Correct. Yeah, I think self-defeating thinking was about, okay, this is the best I can do. That this is it. And it was a very negative view of, oh, well, that's just the way it's going to be. This is your genetics, this is that, this is all the other, and take what you can get from it and make the best of it. And that's not true. There is there's an acceptance piece that replaces self-defeated thinking. This is who I am. This is what I'm willing to do, and this is what I want to do. Self-defeating thinking implies no choice. It implies that I'm a total victim. And it also doesn't allow me to walk in freedom. Because it's
Or
not
trust God.
Trust God or walk in freedom. And what I mean by walk in freedom, what that means to me is the shackles of my past and things that I'm not proud of, which every person does have choices and decisions and consequences of those that we're not proud of, are controlling my today and will control my future. That's just not true. It just is not true anymore for me.
Yeah, so we want to retrain the brain in today's truth, not yesterday's lies.
Exactly. In other words, we were talking about parenting earlier. My anger. Let's do my anger. You've always been angry. You always talk to them in anger tones. Those are not true statements. I could defeat and say, yeah, that's true. That's true. You're a real loser. You're an awful mother. You didn't do anything right.
But see, then you're using those extremes
All
again.
the extremes again. Instead, I recognize I can change. I can learn a new way to communicate. And I have to say, in that example, I have learned, if you were to talk to people who have lived with me for a long time, they would say, she's changed. She's changed because I've learned new ways to communicate my thoughts and feelings and my actions.
And that is so powerful. We can learn new ways, but we have to start with noticing. And so what we need to do here is we need to look at these cognitive distortions. For each of you out there that are listening personally, spend some time, look at these cognitive distortions, read through the handout, ask the Father, which one of these do I do? What am I most prone to? And spend some time noticing, paying attention to these patterns. And the next time we get together, we're going to look at some of the dispute handles. How do we deal with these thinking errors? What are our choices? Because we do have a choice. The only thing we can control are our own thoughts, attitudes, actions, and beliefs.
And the thing I would say and add to that, Rita, is I think it's important that in every stage of development, even from early childhood, you begin to develop thinking patterns. And that's been studied, and there's research on that. And the important factor is to also, as you look at these, recognize you may move out of one at one stage of development, let's say your teen years, and move into another one at another stage of development or another issue in your life, whether it be dating, or young adulthood challenges, and to be aware that rather than grow into these on a deeper level, what we've talked about today is to recognize and acknowledge and see that there are other ways to think and cope with your life.
Yeah. So, leaving you with one thought about stop it. You can choose to stop it. We'll learn how next time. Thanks for joining us. God bless.